All right, so good afternoon, everyone. Welcome, welcome. We've made it to day 4 in our Microsoft Teams training process. I know that some of you all have been with us from the beginning, and some of you, this may be your first time joining us. So either way, we're so happy that you're here. And as we prepare to get started, just a couple of quick housekeeping notes. First of all, you'll see the session sign-in link that's displayed on the screen right now. There's also a link posted in the chat section of this meeting, so you can click on that and quickly access the sign-in sheet. Just enter your name and the session that you're attending, either morning or afternoon, and just let us know that you're here. We're so glad you are here as well. Also, if you would like to earn your CEU credit for your participation today, make sure that you're signed in for this session and signed up through My Learning Plan. So that'll help you get the credit for your participation in attendance. You're also going to notice that your microphone is muted. So during the training today, just go ahead and keep your mic muted so that we can stay focused on the topic at hand, and so that we can keep the flow going. But rest assured that when we get to the end today, I'm going to give you the opportunity to unmute, ask any questions that may be lingering, maybe collaborate, brainstorm with the people that are here about some ideas you have. So again, if you don't mind leaving it muted now, but just know that I will give you the opportunity to unmute and engage when we near the end of the session. So I feel like at this point, if you've been with us all 4 days, you pretty much know this, but I am Maggie Phillips, and I work on the professional development team at PowerUp EDU. We are a Microsoft training partner, so we are always excited to have the opportunity to support teachers and leaders as they leverage Microsoft technology to support student learning. PowerUp is a technology services company. We serve schools and districts in the Southeast. So I'm in Atlanta, and we have offices, though, all over the Southeast. Also, just wanted to point out, I am on Twitter at Maggie L. Phillips. I would love to get connected with you, continue the conversation as well. And since this is our last day together virtually, I wanted to pop my email address up there. If there was any way I could provide further support, I'm Maggie at powerupedu.com. So would love to stay connected. And of course, if there's any way that I can support, happy to do so. So it is day 4, and you all know me probably pretty well at this point, but I'd love to continue getting to know you all as well. So in the chat box, if you'll go ahead and share your name, what you teach, and then one plan you have for this weekend. Lately, the answers to this question have shifted pretty drastically. So in the season of social distancing and quarantine, what is something that you plan to do this weekend? So go ahead and drop that in the chat box. Let's see who's here, and we'll get connected. Working outside, same here, Sherry, I'm with you. Reading a good book, love that, Tiffany. Awesome. Oh, hopefully it is as good as they're predicting, right? Working outside and reading, redecorating a porch, that sounds fun. Going on a hike, working in the garden, gardening, same here, that's awesome. Going for a walk. Ooh, a distance pizza party with the grandkids, that's awesome. Something outside, great. So it's awesome to see that and to kind of hear your plans, especially building upon yesterday, like learning a random fact about a lot of you all. It is great to see, to learn a little bit more about you and kind of get an idea of some things that you might be doing in this kind of unusual season. Again, I would encourage you to kind of review that chat, find people that maybe you've seen a few times and get connected. You all being within the same school district, that gives you an awesome opportunity to connect with people that might also be using Teams in the future, to collaborate on some ideas, and to just kind of hear how it's going for other people. So here's our agenda for today. It may look shorter than our previous days, but we actually have a lot of ground to cover. We just wrapped up the welcome and introduction section. Again, so happy that you all are here, by the way, especially on a Friday afternoon. That's really exciting. For our new content today, we're going to start by looking at the accessibility features that are built into Microsoft Teams. We're going to focus on the Immersive Reader and the Translator tools. And then we're going to spend the majority of our time together today looking at the class notebook. To be fair, we could actually spend an entire day on class notebook. It is that powerful of a resource. But today, I do hope to really share the key features and highlights related to Class Notebook within Teams. And I would encourage you to take the content that we do cover today as it relates to Class Notebook and actually test it out, play around, and explore, and know that this is kind of just a big picture view. There's so much more to it, and it is such a great resource for you and for your students. Again, there's just so much there. Also, just to let you know, Jennifer Hand is going to be planning to offer some sessions in the future on OneNote, Class Notebook, and features of each of those. So you may want to stay tuned for more information. You'll be hearing that hopefully in the future, and we'll have an opportunity to continue your learning there. Because I imagine as you see some of the features today, you'll think of practical ideas for how this could fit into the work that you're doing. That's kind of the goal. So we'll go ahead and get started with the accessibility features. So we're going to dive in today to some of these accessibility features within Microsoft Teams. This is a really cool differentiator for Microsoft when you compare it to some other platforms that are out there. They have truly made a concerted effort to help make content accessible to all learners. And if you think about that, that's a daunting task, but they've built in some tools and resources that have helped make that happen. And one of the ways that they're doing that is by building specific tools that can increase accessibility within their products. Also, quick preface, I am showing you today these accessibility tools and features within the context of Microsoft Teams, but these features and more of them can actually be found in other Microsoft tools as well. So next time you're in Word or another application from Microsoft, you'll likely be able to find these features, and maybe now you'll better understand where they are and what they fit into. So again, while we look at them in the context of Teams, just so you're aware, you can find them in the other Microsoft products as well. All right, so one of those accessibility features is the Immersive Reader. Whenever there is text posted in a channel, so it could be a post or an announcement within Teams, you can access the Immersive Reader, which actually reads aloud the text that's been written. So whenever you see that post, if you click on the 3 dots beside it or the ellipses, you can actually select Immersive Reader, and it opens the text in a new box along with a feature that can support student understanding. Like I mentioned, you can have the text read aloud in a pretty standard way, but you can also have the words broken down by syllables. You can have the text changed in font and size and spacing. You can apply color overlays above the text to make it easier to focus on certain sections or to help with the processing of that text. You can even have the sentences color-coded by parts of speech, with like the verbs being one color, the nouns being one color, same thing for adjectives and adverbs. But at the end of the day, the big picture here is that the Immersive Reader, when we're using it in the context of a class team, the Immersive Reader ensures that no student misses out on content because they're unable to read it, or if the text is written above their level of reading. So regardless of where they are or their reading abilities, this Immersive Reader makes the text accessible to all students. And that's really powerful if you start thinking about it. The Immersive Reader can also be found within the assignment section. So when a student opens up a specific assignment within Teams, in the top right corner, there's a book icon, and this book icon will launch the Immersive Reader to read aloud the specific assignment details to students. So in our previous session, one of the questions was, can I provide verbal directions to students in audio format? And the answer was technically no. However, anything you type here in this assignment section can be accessed with the Immersive Reader, so students can have it read aloud to ensure that they have equitable access to the information, regardless of their reading level or their ability to process or understand written text. So you'll just see that little book icon with a speaker on top of it and know that that is the Immersive Reader. All right, there's another tool that's a game changer, and that's the Translator. And this also addresses the needs of unique learners within the context of Teams, but again, it's in other Microsoft products as well. Students can find the Translator option by clicking on the little ellipses for more options within a post. So they go into a team, they find a post, click on those 3 little dots, just like the process for using the Immersive Reader. With the translation option, though, you can choose to translate the content to another language by word or by document. So word by word does that basic one-to-one translation, while if you select translate the whole document, it takes the content as a whole and it translates it within the context of what's written. So that's usually a little more accurate. But again, both are great options. Either way, awesome ways to access content despite potential language barriers for students and families. So what I wanted to do now was just take a minute and actually pull up the Teams account, the demo account, and let you see what these features would look like in real life. Because again, it's one thing to see it on a screenshot. It's something completely different when we actually see it within the context of Teams. So on my screen, you're going to see the Teams landing page for my account. I'll see all of my courses listed. I'm going to dive in today to this Buncombe County Schools 3rd grade mathematics team just for practice purposes. And when I click on that, I'll notice that I've got my channels in this me space over here, and here in the we space, I see some post. So I can access the resources here in a couple of different ways. The first is I can hover over any post that I have made or that a student has made and click on the 3 little dots, and that's going to give me more information about these announcements or a post. One of those options, though, is Immersive Reader. And when you select Immersive Reader, it's going to take your text and open it in a new window. Rest assured, it's easy to get back, so take a deep breath and don't stress when you see this. But what you see here is that post, word for word, written here within the context of Teams. And within the post, I'm turning that feature off. We looked at that in the last session. But what we see here on the right is a series of tools that can help us make this content even more accessible. And then at the bottom, I have a play button. When you click the play button, it begins reading. It uses a highlighting feature to show each word that's being read. And we also have, again, those options here with text preferences. So when I click on that, I can make the text smaller or larger, again, making that accessible to all types of students. So we can change the font. Here you can decrease or increase the spacing. So if you want your words to be closer together and appear more like they would in actual context, you can do that. You can choose between one of 3 fonts. And I'll say these 3 fonts were all specifically selected because of their readability and the way that they make text accessible to people that may struggle with the visual processing aspect of typing and reading text. Then you'll see the themes, and essentially these apply color overlays over the text to make it easier to understand, to process, or to focus on. If you've ever had a student that has an IEP that requires the use of a color overlay or other device that can be used to support that processing of text, these serve a very similar purpose there. You'll see the option to add more colors. There's plenty of options to choose from depending on your need. Next to the text preferencing option, you'll see the grammar options. This is a really neat piece as well. When you click on those grammar options, you have the opportunity to display your text in terms of syllables, so showing where the breaks in those or the pauses within those words are happening. You can turn that off or on. And you can determine whether you want to display the words by their parts of speech. So if you wanted all nouns to be labeled in purple, for example, and all verbs in red, all you have to do is click on the toggle button and pull those right up. You can also click on show labels, meaning every time there's an adjective, an adverb, a noun, or a verb, it'll actually put the little label above it. So you could probably think with your teacher brain of a time or two that might be helpful, but for a lot of our students, that can be helpful with the processing aspect. You'll also notice to the right, the reading preferences. This is one that I've found to be the most useful, actually, is the line focus option. Right now, when I look at this screen, I'm seeing all of the text at once. And when I have it start reading to me, I'm going to be able to see that highlighting, identifying each word. But for a lot of our students, this could be a very overwhelming piece of text to look at. So what you can do is you can click on the one line feature. to allow your student, or your student can click on the one-line feature to allow them to look at just one line of text at a time. That is, again, going to provide that focus and attention on what needs to be seen the most. You can change that to the 2 lines of text at a time, or you can change it to see 3 lines of text. But again, it just focuses in on what's most important. You will also see the add-in of BoardMaker. If you've ever used BoardMaker, if you work with younger students or in special education, you will likely notice the BoardMaker here and do some celebrations in that. So BoardMaker allows students to see pictures that represent the content being displayed. So when you use the picture dictionary, you can get a little image or icon above the words that will provide that visual representation of the content. And here you also have access to translating it into different options. So you can translate here into another language. So if your students would like to access this in their native language, they can translate it right here. And again, once you choose a language, you select by word, meaning a one-to-one translation, or by document, meaning it takes the content, the whole content piece, and provides that translation in the context of the native language. So that's an option. When you're done here with the immersive reader, you don't have to stress that you're stuck here or you have to log back in or anything like that. Just click this back arrow in the top left corner and it'll bring us right back to our posting. So again, that virtual meeting, I no longer have to hope that my students can read it or that they do, but I have the option again to have the immersive reader and have it read to them. And from that option, I can also have it translated. Another option is when you're hovering over that post, you'll notice the translate link. This will take any post that you see and translate it into your native language. So those are really, really helpful options there, and would encourage you to check those out and test and play around. And then again, knowing that while we are looking at translated immersive reader within the context of Teams, you'll find it as well in the other Microsoft suite of tools. So hopefully that gives you kind of an idea of what that looks like in those features in application. Those are truly game-changing features within Teams and make as amazing when we consider using it with our students. So there is no doubt that those accessibility features are amazing and they're awesome. We love them. But another amazing element of Teams is the seamless integration to Class Notebook. So we're going to kind of transition now. We took a few minutes to look at those accessibility features, and now we're going to look at Class Notebook. You may have used OneNote or Class Notebook before, which is awesome. If you have, just know that the Teams integration makes this creation and setup process so simple. If you've never used Class Notebook before, that is completely fine. Stick with us, and I think you're going to learn a lot about an amazing tool that you can actually use with your students in the future, and could be that one tool where you go, I don't know how I taught without it. We love finding tools like that. I do want to make sure I'm really clear here before we do a super deep dive into this Class Notebook within Teams. Class Notebook can be accessed within the OneNote app as well. So it can be accessed within Teams, but it can also be accessed within OneNote. So for the purposes of what we're going to do today, we're really going to focus on using Class Notebook within the context of Teams, because this is a Teams focus, how we would build it out in Teams, how we would leverage it within Teams. But just so you know, you can take that notebook that you created within Teams and actually open it within the OneNote app for full functionality and usage. So if you're maybe a user of Class Notebook and you're not quite sure how these two fit together, just know that even if you build a Class Notebook in Teams, you can open it in the OneNote app, which makes it amazing. And because they sync and they talk to each other constantly, the changes you make within a OneNote Class Notebook are reflected in all the versions of it. So you have that as well. So before we get started, I'd love to get a pulse on where you all are with the idea of Class Notebook. So in the chat with just a single number, go ahead and let me know your comfort level with Class Notebook. If you've never heard of it, that is totally fine. You might put 0. This morning we had people putting lots of decimal points, which was funny. If you're like, sit back, Maggie, I could teach this, you would be a 5. So again, the goal here is just for me to kind of gauge the general understanding so I can make adjustments as we go. So just drop that number in the chat. And good news, if you're a 0, a 1, or even a 2, you should be able to leave this session going up at least 2 numbers. And then if you're a 5, which is amazing, you hopefully will see that seamless integration to Teams. Awesome. So we've got a lot of different levels of understanding represented. Love to see that. And hopefully, again, all of you will get some deeper understanding of how Class Notebook fits. And again, for those of you that are a 4 or 5, you're going to see things a little bit differently today because we will be looking at it within the context of Teams, and especially the setup process is a little bit different. If you're a 0, a 1, or a 2, let me just tell you the best way to learn about Class Notebook from the beginning is building it through Teams, because it's going to make this process so easy. So thank you guys for sharing that. And again, hopefully you'll be progressing up as we go. So the big idea behind Class Notebook is that it's a digital 3-ring binder for an entire class of students. So in your mind, I'm going to pause for just a second, and I want you to think of a 3-ring binder, like the kind that has the metal ring in the middle and pockets on the front and the back. And I'm thinking about OneNote Class Notebook as a big one, like a 4 or 5-inch 3-ring binder. So think about that for just a second. Okay, within this 3-ring binder that's very thick, you've got dividers in that notebook that's separated into 3 spaces. So the first section of that notebook is what we call the content library. And this is a place that you as a teacher can store resources that students can see, but they can't make any changes to. So here you might put in copies of reading passages or study guides or lesson resources or even notes. The students in your class can open the notebook up and can look at any of those things that you've put into the content library, but they cannot make any changes to it. They can make a copy of something or download their own version of it, but your version remains unchanged for all the other students to see and access. So when I think about that practical connection to a 3-ring binder, I think about things in the content library being in sheet protectors. It's content that you put there so nobody can write directly on that sheet. Nobody can change it or manipulate it because it's in a sheet protector. So that's kind of what content in the content library is like. The second section of this digital 3-ring binder is what we call the collaboration space. And in the collaboration space, students can interact together. They can collaborate on tasks or assignments, and anything that you as the teacher post in this collaboration space can be changed, manipulated, or deleted by your students. So the collaboration space is a great place for students to go for shared work and to work together on a given task or assignment. But again, because students can make changes to the content that's in the collaboration space, you wouldn't want to put anything here that you did not want changed. So again, it's just like it says, it's a space for collaboration. And the last, but I think the coolest part of the class notebook is the individual student notebook section. So within this big 3-ring binder, 4 or 5-inch thick binder, behind the collaboration space, behind the content library, each student has a section of this notebook that's just for them. It's their own personal workspace. And students can see their own section of the notebook. And you as the teacher can see the students' notebooks, but students can't see each other's notebooks. So it's a private place for students to work. It's also that great place for you to provide individual resources to students or provide specific feedback to individual students and kind of keep a pulse on where your kids are with their work. So students, again, can see the content library, the collaboration space, and they can see their own personal notebook. To be a little more specific, these are the permission levels that are available for each section. And I pull this up because it comes back up as we set up a class notebook through Teams. And so I want to make sure that I highlight these pieces. So here we see what each person involved in a notebook can see and do. Up at the top, we see the collaboration space. And in this space, students and teachers can work together, and both students and teachers can edit the content. So this is, again, that shared workspace. Now, with the content library, this is a place for teachers to publish course materials to their students. The teachers can edit the content, but the students can only view it. So if you're taking notes, Content library for students, it's read-only. And then with the student notebooks, each student has a private space for learning, and the teacher can edit the content in that student notebook space, and the students can edit the content in their own notebook space, but they cannot view the content or interact with the content of other students, which is great because we would not want that to happen. So now that you see how a class notebook is organized, let's explore how to build out this notebook. And as you probably noticed in our deep dive of teams over the past week, the class notebook tab is within all class teams. It's there by default. So when we looked at assignment and grading, we saw those two tabs at the top, but there's another tab at the top that's automatically there, and that is the class notebook. So again, wanted to point out that that's how you get to it within Teams as you go into the team, and at the top you find the class notebook tab, which is in the We space. Again, you do not have to add this. It's already there if you build out a class team or if your classes are already built in Teams for you, which is the case for your district. You do have to go through some setup steps to get the notebook set up, but just know that class notebook is already there. And again, for those of you that said you were a 3, a 4, or a 5 in your understanding of class notebook, I just want to point out that the setup process that we use within Teams is a little bit different than the way you would set up a class notebook within OneNote. So it may look different, but I will tell you that setting it up within the context of Teams is going to save you so much time. It's worth it. So stick with us as we go, and you may be able to compare it to the process if you've used it before of setting it up through OneNote. So when you click on Class Notebook for the first time at the top, that tab, this is the screen that you're going to see on the left. You'll see the option to set up a OneNote class notebook. And when you click on that setup button, you're going to be given two choices: to set up a notebook from scratch, like a blank notebook, or to set up a notebook from an existing notebook content that you have already created. So makes it easy. If you've never used Class Notebook, then you don't have any content. So you'll want to start with a blank notebook by default. That makes it super easy. But if you have used Class Notebook before, and you have a notebook that's rich with content that you'd like to use, maybe you have invested in building out an amazing instructional resource, you can copy over the content of another notebook to this Class Notebook. So for those of you that are OneNote pioneers, and maybe you even have your OneNote capes, you'll know that the ability to copy over content from an existing notebook is amazing. This could also come in really handy if you have multiple sections of the same course and you build out that notebook once, and then you're able to use that content for multiple sections of your class. Next up, you're going to be given an overview of the OneNote class notebook that's being built, and it does share an overview of the notebook sections and those permissions that we just looked at. So if you're new to Class Notebook, when you get to this point, I would encourage you to pause, to take a minute, review each section, and make sure you understand kind of how that notebook is structured or organized. Once you look at that, there's actually no changes you can make here. It's just telling you what it is. You click on Next. And when you get to the next, it takes you to the last step in the decision-making process. And this is making a decision about what sections you want each student to have in their individual notebook. So remember that in student notebooks, both you and your students can add content. Students can see the content of their notebook, but they can't see that content in other students' notebooks. And you as the teacher can see and modify and do anything in your students' notebooks. But by default, each student notebook has some sections. And you'll notice that there's 4 default sections. There's a section for handouts, a section for class notes, a section for homework, and a section for quizzes. But let's be really real for a minute, and that probably does not fit your needs exactly. And that's absolutely fine because you can customize it here. You select the X that's to the right of any of those sections. So this little X right here, to delete it. So maybe one doesn't fit, just click the X and it goes away. And you'll notice the add section link below the suggested sections where you can add your own. So you may not ask your students to do quizzes within the context of Class Notebook, So you might delete that section. But on the other hand, you might ask students to maybe keep track of their reading with a reading journal. So you might add a new section that's titled Reading Journal. Again, it's fully customizable here. And you don't have to build out the sections for each student individually. Class Notebook does that for you. Just tell it what sections you'd like to see for your students, and it will make it happen. Again, saves you so much time, because I don't know about you, but if I taught 150 students, going through and adding sections for each of those students would take forever. So again, Teams makes it easy. You plug in the sections that you want, and it applies it to every student notebook. Once you make your decision, all you have to do is click on the Create button next. Just like that, you've got a class notebook. It gets no easier than that. Teams actually did a lot of the heavy lifting in the creation of this notebook. If you have created a class notebook before, you're probably going, where are the rest of the steps? Or you're missing some things. But actually, Teams has done a lot of the heavy lifting and done some things that you would have had to do manually if you were creating this in the context of OneNote. So first of all of your students are already added to the notebook, each having their own section. And that's because Teams took the students that are enrolled in your class or your team and automatically added them to the notebook. You don't have to go through and add your students. Teams does that. Same thing goes when you have students that enroll that are new that get added to a team through your school data sync. You will see those students. They have a section in your notebook. It may take 24 hours or so from the time they enroll. If you have a student that withdraws, you can remove their stuff as well. But again, Teams handles all of that. And Teams also adds a section in the notebook too to keep everything updated. So every time you add a channel to a team, it may be a channel for a small group assignment, for a project, or for just collaboration, Teams automatically adds a section within the collaboration space of your class notebook that represents the channel name. So how easy is that? And how is that for making things streamlined? Like, it's all in one spot. And having Teams add your students and your sections, I can't begin to tell you how much time this could save you in the process. So that's the setup process in a nutshell. You can't make it any easier than that. It's basic. But we did go through a lot of information there. So let's take a minute to reflect. In the chat box, if you'll use the Sum It Up protocol, and in just one sentence, how would you describe the class notebook setup within Teams? I'm going to give you about a minute to jot one down. Yes, they are already in a team. That's awesome. And Cynthia, to answer your question, yes, you can add sections at a later time. Easier than I thought it would be. I like to hear that. Yes, it is. Yes, it's much easier than it used to be for sure. Thorough, very easy, yes. So those of you that were class notebook pioneers and have set them up in the past, I imagine that's feedback that a lot of people that see it within the context of Teams share. It does make it so easy. There are a lot of options too as well. That's a great suggestion, Catherine. Awesome. So you can keep those going. And class notebook will be populated with students via PowerSchool course. Yes, that is correct, Jennifer. That's awesome. Setting it up makes it easy to all connected, no missing notebooks, no need to share with searches. Yes, awesome stuff. So feel free to continue adding those resources as we go, or those ideas as we go. Again, this is a great place to revisit later and just kind of see the feedback of others that can help us in our learning process as well. So now that you've got the process for setting up this notebook understood, let's dive into how to navigate it and how to work within a class notebook in Teams. So class notebook, as we're looking at class notebook on the screen, let's point out some of the important buttons that can aid in getting you navigated and accessing the content. The first thing and the most important thing I'm going to say, like if you hear nothing else today about navigating a class notebook within Teams, the first and most important thing is this caret or arrow that's in the top left corner. It's funny because I tried to put an arrow and a circle around it because it's that important. This button is going to be your best friend because it expands the notebook so you can see the sections, so you can navigate. Again, if you're a note taker, maybe draw a picture of this, put some stars around it, maybe some hearts because you're going to love it. But that arrow or the caret button is essential to leveraging class notebook within Teams. I'll also say that when the notebook opens within Teams, students may not know how to click that button. So it's a good idea on your first page of a notebook, if you are going to be using it within Teams, to have a reminder on the screen like the one on this picture on the first page to let students know to use that to further expand. Because guys, if you don't expand from here, you cannot navigate in your notebook. So very, very important piece. You'll also notice in the top right corner, there's an expand button. And that expand button is going to allow you to make the view that you have of the class notebook within Teams bigger. So that can be very helpful. And again, the most important thing is this caret or arrow button that will let you expand your team menu. And again, it'll show you your collaboration space, your content library, and an access to all of your student notebooks. So when you click on that arrow or the caret to display your sections, on the left side, you are going to see the name of your class notebook at the very top. So in this screenshot, it says BCS 3rd grade mathematics notebook. You'll also see on that left side the class of your class notebook, the sections. This is where within each section, you'll see how your notebook is divided, the collaboration space, the content library, and the individual student notebooks. And within each section, you can have pages. So think about these sections as dividers. And the next column is our pages, or the pages that are within a section. These are going to allow you to dive a little more deeply into each of the sections. And then you have this main space or the workspace within a class notebook. And this is where you're going to be adding the content. And to put it really simply, this space is like a blank canvas. And you can add virtually anything to it. Documents, links, text, images, videos, audio files. If it's digital, it can pretty much be added here. This is not a space that's just limited to text. It's super open for resources. So to drill down a little bit further here, in this screenshot that you're seeing on the screen, we're on the welcome page of the notebook. And you're going to notice that there's purple highlighting over the welcome section on the notebook to the left. And we'll also see that we're on the welcome to class notebook page. Again, the highlighting lets us know where we are. And we know we're on this welcome page because we see the title at the top and we see the name of the page here. And then in the main workspace or the canvas, there's an overview of what class notebook is. We see an image and we see text. But just know we are not limited to those two formats of media. We can have so much more here. So at the top of a notebook section, you're going to see a toolbar. And there are tabs within this toolbar that you've probably seen before. They probably look pretty familiar. If you've used Microsoft tools before, like Word or PowerPoint or Excel, you're going to see very similar tabs. There's a home tab, an insert tab, a draw tab, a view tab, a help tab, and then a class notebook tab listed. That class notebook tab we're going to spend some time today talking about specifically. Also within the toolbar, you're going to see the option to open in browser. So you'll see that with a little down arrow beside it. As I mentioned earlier, you can actually work on a class notebook within Teams, or you can open it within OneNote. So either on the web or on the OneNote application that's stored on your computer. So if you want your class notebook to fill up the entire screen and you want to work within OneNote exclusively, you can click on that open in browser section and select how you'd like to open it, whether you want to open it on the web or on an app. And the amazing thing here is that any changes you make to that class notebook, whether on the web, within Teams, or in the OneNote app, everything is synced. So any changes you make will be reflected in the actual notebook. So anywhere you open it, you'll see those changes. So again, if you want to open it in a browser, work directly in OneNote, it will sync and you have nothing to worry about there. Okay. As I mentioned, there's also a series of tools that open each time you click on a tab at the top. For example, in this screenshot, I've clicked on the Home tab, which means I have access to tools like text formatting features, tagging content, the spell check, and even the dictate option. So see that little microphone to the right, for example, you can use that dictate feature to record things that you're saying and have them transcribed to text. There's a lot you can do there. And that's a feature we'll spend a little bit of time looking at in just a few minutes. So what I want to do now is I want to jump away from this presentation. I'm going to pull up a class notebook within Teams, and we're going to just explore some of the tools that are available, because often knowing what's there can help you envision how this would fit in the work that you're doing. So I'm going to pull up that demo team again, and I'm going to go into that Buncombe County Schools and click on third grade mathematics. You'll notice at the top that we have class notebook as one of the tabs. Again, I did not have to access that. I didn't have to create it. It's already there. And all I have to do is click on the class notebook section, and it's going to automatically pull up my class notebook. I'm going to see my tools here at the top. I'm going to see that expand button that I can access. But if you're a note taker, you put some stars and possibly some hearts around this next really important part. I can't do anything to navigate within my notebook unless I click on this caret or arrow button. That is, again, going to expand my navigation options within Teams, and I can't move between different sections without doing that. So a lot of people get frozen at this point and go, I can't use this, or where's my stuff, or I'm not sure where everything is. How do I navigate? All you have to do is click on that open navigation arrow. And again, when you do that, you'll see on the left side the sections of your notebook, the collaboration space. In this case, in our collaboration space, we see information about how to use it, how a team could collaborate. I see my content library. For example, in this section, I might have content that I want students to be able to access but not change. So if I click on problem solving, here's a problem solving checklist, or I might access a problem solving graphic organizer. Again, I can provide these to my students here. And then I have pages again within each section that I can use to further navigate. So I'm going to go in here to a blank page. Notice at the bottom you can add a new section or a new page. I'm going to call this Friday afternoon. Just give us a little bit of workspace to test out some of the tools that are here. So once I click here, notice my menu automatically floats back to give me the space I need to work. I am on the Home tab, and so I have access to my basic suite of tools. I'm going to click on any of the white space. You can literally click anywhere to begin typing, and you'll notice you've got basic font change resources, color of fonts, and formatting features. You can add bulleted list and numbered list. You can add tags. That would be for a Beyond the Basics training, but just know you can tag content within Teams. You've got spell check, which always comes in handy. And then again, you have that dictate option, which allows you to begin speaking, and it will take anything you're saying and convert it to text. You'll also notice that when you go into dictate, that there are other languages represented. So there's not quite as many languages within dictate as you would find in translate. There's a set of standard ones, and there's also some preview languages that Microsoft is in the process of deploying. So if that ever came in helpful, just know that they're continuing to add those languages here. Also wanted to point out the next tab over is the Insert tab, and this is really how we put content into a notebook. And we have at the beginning the part as the table, and that's pretty basic, just like in a Google Doc or in a Word document. To add a table, you just select the cells you'd like to add, how many rows, how many columns, and once you click on that, it's added to your team. From here, you can shrink it, grow it, stretch it, do whatever you want. You get some formatting options as well that you can use, but that's kind of just the simple adding of a table. There are two ways that you can add a file. And what I will tell you is that as you begin to use Class Notebook, the adding of files will be the one you likely use the most. When you add a file, there's two ways to do it. You can add it as an attachment, meaning it becomes a little icon on the screen, or you can add a file as a printout. If you add it as a printout, That just means that the document is actually printed on the page so students can see it. An example of that is within my content library, my problem-solving checklist is actually printed on the page. Whereas if I wanted to add an attachment, I choose my file and I'm going to select completed assignment, insert, and I'll notice that over here to the right, this now becomes an icon that I can access. So this has been inserted as an attachment. It's not displaying on the actual screen. So that's just kind of a little example of what that might look like. So you also have the option to add a picture. You can add a picture from your device, so something that's already stored. You can add something from your camera, of course, on the device that you're using, and you can add a picture from online that will launch a Bing search. So if you want to find clip art or images that relate to what you're teaching or content you want students to have, you can do that. The link button allows you to add links to web-based resources. So for those of you, again, using Google suite of tools, and you want to add a link to a Google Doc or a Google Slides presentation, you can add that as well. It's just simply adding a link. There is also the audio button, and there's a video button as well that you can have access to. When you click on this, it immediately begins an audio recording. And so a lot of times you might have the opportunity to explain something to students, or you want a student to record themselves reading a passage, or you want students to talk through solving a problem. As soon as you hit that audio button, it's going to begin recording your voice, and it will store it as an audio file. It is different than dictate in that it's not converting it to text on the page. It's actually just storing your voice speaking. So that can come in really handy with students. And for you on that teacher perspective, it's often easier to explain something than to type it all out. So that's one option. You also have the option to use symbols. That came as some feedback from teachers that said, hey, I want to be able to add, the pi sign, or I'm having a hard time finding a fraction bar. Where could I find that? That can come under symbols. Math can also be found here. And I'm going to speak to this math feature a little bit more when we get to the Draw tab, because it's also found on the Draw tab. I think it fits a little bit better there, but I do want you to know that I'm going to come right back to that, because to me, if you teach math at any level, this feature is a game changer. You can add emojis to it. Again, you have your standard suite of emojis. You'll notice there's school appropriate ones, which is a win. You're not going to see anything that you wouldn't want students to use. You have the ability to add additional add-ins to your OneNote class notebook. Again, that's probably for a Beyond the Basics session, but you do have that option. You can also add a form to your class notebook. So imagine you created a form where maybe you're soliciting information for students about learning preferences, or how they are doing with a project, or maybe how virtual learning is going for them. You can add a form, or you can even add a quiz. We spoke about quizzes yesterday within forms, and you can add a form as well. There's also some stickers. This is funny because typically when we do a face-to-face training, stickers are like the thing that excite people the most, which I always find really funny. There's a series of images that can be added as stickers, and you can customize them with messages for your students. So if your students are doing work within Class Notebook, you can reward them with stickers. And again, they're kind of random, but there are some neat ones there. I'm going to transition on over to the Draw tab. And the Draw tab is exactly what it sounds like. It allows you to freehand write on a page. So in this case, I'm selecting the pen, I'm selecting the green pen, and I'm just writing on the screen. If you have a touch screen, or you're on an iPhone, or other cellular device, or if you're on a device that's got a mouse connected or a trackpad, you can draw as well. Just know that this does provide you the option to annotate. You can use a highlighter, which will write over something. You can use the drawing features. Of course, there's an eraser. You can go back to your text if you'd like. And then, of course, there's more color options as well that you may see. And then line thickness. Now, speaking to the math tools, because again, they're back here. They're on that insert tab, but it's also here within the Draw tab. One of the things that Microsoft received a lot of feedback on was teachers saying, I teach math where we're creating some pretty elaborate equations, and it's really hard to type those. If you have math type, that makes it easier, but not everybody does have math type. So what you can do here is you can actually hand write out a math problem. So you write it out with the pen tool. And again, if you have a touch screen, that makes it easier. Or you can type it out to the best of your ability. And then you draw a square around it. You use this marquee tool to select it. And when you type the math button, it will convert your handwritten text into the actual typed equation. So you can copy and paste it somewhere else, or you can have that version for students. The example I see used a lot is that sometimes it's hard to make a fraction where you have your numerator perfectly aligned with your denominator and aligned down the middle, and to format that appropriately in an equation. And so with this, you just write out what you want it to look like on the screen and use the math tool to convert it, and it will end up looking here at the bottom just like a typed example. These are just a couple of examples that you might see. If you keep it moving, because for the sake of time, we're going to, on the View tab, you have opportunity to view your class notebook in a lot of different ways. You can change the navigation pane, which is that caret or arrow that we have to make it stay there while you're working within Teams. You'll see the Immersive Reader, which is, again, we looked at today, amazing. Reading View, which will remove distracting content from around the text that a student should be reading. You can also change the page color. Again, that can help students with processing pieces. And you can view the page versions here as well. One of the things I wanted to point out today is this morning, one of the questions that popped up probably 4 or 5 times was, within the collaboration space, can I see which students have added what content? And that's where this page version section comes in. When you click on page versions, it's going to allow you to see different versions of the page as it's been updated. And when you click on show author, it will show any name associated with stuff that's added. So you should be able to see the name so you don't have to wonder which student added which piece of content. And then there's an accessibility checker as well. That accessibility checker essentially looks at your document and identifies areas that maybe make the content harder for a student to access. So maybe your font is too small or your background color is too dark for your text. It'll tell you any of those things right there. There's also a help tab. Won't spend a lot of time here. There's only one button within it, which is help. So how do you get immediate access to support and on-demand resources? You can get those here. The class notebook tab is kind of the secret sauce here. I'm going to go back and I'm going to pull up an example of, for example, this graphic organizer. Notice I have shown names, so it's showing that I added it. When I get to this class notebook tab, I'm going to have the opportunity to efficiently, keyword there, interact with my notebook and distribute content. So here in the content library, I've got this page. It's a problem-solving graphic organizer for my students. And maybe I want to provide this resource to every student in their own notebook so they can write on it. I don't have to copy and paste it and go student by student to add it. I can click on this distribute page at the top, and I can distribute this page to individual students. I can distribute it to the whole group. So if I don't want to differentiate, I can distribute it to notebooks across different notebooks. So maybe I teach 5 sections of the exact same course, and I've got one resource that I want to go in every student's folder. I can do a cross notebook distribution as well. So let's just say I want to take this graphic organizer and I want to distribute it to one student. I can come over here to the right and select which student I want to give it to and click next and tell me where I want to put it. I want it to be in the handout section. I hit distribute. And now this graphic organizer is in the students section. So again, you can do it one at a time, or you can do it for every student at the same time. And notice you'll keep track here on the right. It says it's done. So I could find that then within the student section. You can also distribute an entire section. So in this case, I just distributed this graphic organizer page. But if I wanted to distribute this whole problem solving section, I would click on the distribute new section. And again, I can choose whether I want to give it to one student or all of my students. I can also make a copy of the entire content library to share with students. The next one over is really, really helpful as well, and that is the review student work section. As your students are adding content to their OneNote class notebook, instead of you having to click on each student's name and go look for their work, as they add it, you can click on the review student work. And if they've submitted work within the class notebook or they posted work, it will pop up and you can just click one by one and it will be curated in one list for you. So it makes it really easy. And then you can do management elements of your notebook here as well. So getting a link to that notebook, making any changes you would want to the notebook can be done here. You can add some connectors. Again, that would be for a more advanced training. There's professional development. This will give you access to on-demand resources for using class notebook, whether it's how do I navigate the toolbar or how do I get resources to help me with this actually using it in the classroom. I can find those here. And then again, that open in browser link at the top is really helpful. Personally, I find it easier sometimes when I'm building out a lot of content to take the notebook out of Teams and open it in either the browser or the app. So to do that, you just click on open in browser. You can select again, open in browser, open in app. All this is going to do, if you notice, is that it's opening my notebook in a new tab here at the top, and it's opening it within OneNote. I still have access to all of those insert features. I still have access to my class notebook tab. I still have everything here. But again, I'm opening it now within the context of OneNote. I have more space to work, so it's not as small as I would have it in Teams. But any changes that I make to my class notebook here are automatically reflected here when I go back to Teams. You'll know that's happening because in this right corner, there's a little cloud with a check mark on it. And that cloud with a check mark is letting us know the sync status. Anytime you see that cloud with a check mark, you can know you have the most recently updated version of that notebook. So whether you've edited in the app or whether you've edited in the browser, you have all of that there, right there for you. So you have nothing to worry about there. So those are kind of the key elements of that class notebook, how to navigate it, how to use the tools. And I will tell you again, this is truly just scratching the surface of what class notebook has to offer. We could truly spend an entire day here looking at it. There's just so much to it. So before we go any further, I would like for you in that chat box to type in one tool that you are looking forward to trying out, because that will help me kind of gauge what you think will be most relevant to you, but it also may give somebody that's sitting here today an idea of a tool or resource that they want to use. So go ahead and just type in within that tool, within those OneNote class notebook tools, what are you most looking forward to using? Are you all about the dictate option, or are you thinking about something else? The math tools will be amazing. Yes, I agree. Math symbols, game changer. It's the best. Immersive reader, yes. Yes, yes. Every student having access to that content is amazing. Inside and outside of the classroom, that can be beneficial. Immersive reader, agree. Yeah, no, the highlighter. Yeah, highlighter. It's like, that is such a clutch resource when you want to point stuff out to students. I love it. That's definitely important. Dictation, yes. Sarah, I'm with you on that as well. I use the dictate feature a lot, especially when I'm taking notes in meetings. And I see it used a lot in the classroom as well. Verbal directions, yes. You don't have to depend on knowing that your students actually read directions, because I don't know about you, but when I was teaching my students, they rarely read the directions, but being able to give them access to an audio file to listen to the directions makes it a lot easier for sure. Awesome. Those are some great, great, great suggestions. So as we wrap up today, again, day 4, for those of you that have been with us all 4 days, thank you. That is awesome. I am posting the Wakelet resources again up on the screen. I'll drop those in the chat very shortly as well. Here is your redeem code for the Microsoft Educator Center. Again, you can enter that code if you've been with us all this week. We know they're running a little behind on getting those digital badges and certificates, but know that those are available. So redeem code, enter that within the Microsoft Educator community to track your progress and your learning path. And then you can also from that website access on-demand training resources to learn more about Class Notebook. Because maybe today you sat here and you're like, hey, this actually could be really helpful with the students that I teach or in the content that I'm covering. So, and you want more resources on that, of course, you guys have an amazing team of digital facilitators that you can lean into, but Microsoft Educator community also has some great resources. There's also a survey. I would welcome your feedback on the sessions. It's short and sweet, but would help us with the going forward with our Microsoft training. There's also, if you joined us late, there is a session sign-in, and the bit.ly is on the screen. Again, I'm going to drop all of this in the chat in just a second to make that easier. But would make sure you put your name and which session you're attending so I can get that to your team. And then if you want credit for this, you want to earn your CEU for your participation, make sure you are signed up from My Learning Plan. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to stop the recording, and I'm going to ask you to post any questions that you